Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the different treaties that set the foundation of politics and international relations, going through key definitions and discussing political systems and ideologies. And this is all part of the Framing Global Politics section of Topic 1. So the first treaty is the Peace of Westphalia, or also known as the Treaty of Westphalia. This marked the end of the 30 Years' War in 1648 and established a new framework for international relations based on state sovereignty and territorial integrity, laying the groundwork for the modern state system. It gave birth to three essential principles which would define the sovereign states. So the first one is whose realm his religion. This meant that religion was exclusively an internal affair and war was not to be declared for religious reasons. The second principle is every king is the emperor in his kingdom. This meant that all states are independent and equal to each other and established an anarchy between them. The third one is no one can be stronger than others, which prevented any of the states from dominating each other and ensuring stability. And this shows how important balance of power is in politics. If a state accepted these requirements, it would be recognized as an international citizen who's able to maintain its own culture, politics, religion, and internal policies, shielded by the international system from outside intervention. The treaty established the idea of a political order based on independent sovereign states with defined borders, which became the foundation for the contemporary international system, with the principles still being prevalent today. The next treaty is the Montevideo Convention. So the Montevideo Convention was a treaty signed in Montevideo, Uruguay in 1933, and it aimed to clarify exactly what constitutes as a state. The four principles that were outlined in order to be a state were permanent population, defined territory, effective government, and the ability to enter foreign relations. So essentially, the state must not have many immigrants, must have sufficient consistency and preferably uncontested borders, a government that exercises effective authority over their territory, and must have the recognition and power to conduct international relations. However, there are a few issues presented in this convention. So for example, many sovereign states have contestable sovereign features that don't meet the four main criteria of a sovereign state. So for example, Syria is not recognized as a state, so it's essentially a stateless nation. Another issue is that many IGOs may fit the criteria of a state as well, even though they are composed of multiple states, for example, the EU. Therefore, you could argue that these challenges raise questions about the definition of statehood and the relevance of the Montevideo criteria in modern international politics. So next we're going to be talking about the different IB definitions for this section. So a state, as we've said and mentioned before, is an organized political entity with a permanent population, well-defined territory, government, and ability to enter foreign relations. A nation is a group of people who feel a common identity due to a shared language, culture, and history. A nation-state is a specific geographic area containing a sovereign polity whose people identifies with that. National people are a group of people who feel a common identity due to a shared language, culture, and history, who live inside and outside of the state. A stateless nation, like I mentioned as Syria, is a group of people who feel a common identity due to a shared language, culture, and history, but do not have the features of a sovereign state. A multi-nation state is a state composed of multiple nations, each with their own distinct culture, and a multi-state nation are those where a distinct cultural group lives in multiple states. These are really easy to confuse with each other, so it's important that you know them distinctly and clearly. And then finally, sovereignty is a state's ability to rule itself free from domestic and foreign control, and legitimacy is the right and acceptance of an authority, usually a governing law or a regime, whereas authority denotes a specific position in an established government. The term legitimacy denotes a system of government. Next, we're going to be talking about the different political systems. So on this side, we have democracy, flawed democracy, and theocracy. A democracy is a political system in which a government is based on a mandate from citizens, typically through elected representatives. It emphasizes political equality, accountability, and the protection of freedom and human rights. Features of a democracy are free and fair elections, political participation, and freedom of speech. A flawed democracy, however, is a democracy with elements of democratic governance, but it has issues such as low levels of political participation or bad functioning of governance. Features include free but not fair elections, such as the United States due to their electoral votes. Most other features of a full democracy are in a flawed democracy, however, they may have one or two issues. A theocracy is a form of government based on religion, and religious leaders typically govern the city in the name of deity. Features include no elections and no political participation because their laws rely heavily based on religious doctrines and they basically follow the law of their religion. Next, the monarchy is a political system in which sovereignty is embodied in a single individual, the monarch, who holds power by hereditary right. So this is usually the royal family and they hold all the ruling. And there's very little amounts or none at all of political participation. An oligarchy is a form of power structure where power rests with a small number of people. People often distinguish by nobility, wealth, family ties, etc., and there's usually no opposition towards them. And finally, a dictatorship or autocracy is a form of government in which a single person or a small group possesses absolute power without effective constitutional limitations. The use of force is often used in autocracies as their form of legitimacy to enhance their compliance instead of consent. And they usually follow a hierarchy structure where one power at the top decides everything and that's enforced on the rest of the state. Finally, these are political ideologies. I took this from my lesson, and it shows from the far left to the far right the different ideologies and kind of explains them and what they believe in. So communism, socialism, social democracy, liberalism, conservatism, nationalism, and fascism. And if you read this, it's good for revision and you can link it back to the different types of states and what their ideologies would most likely be like. Thanks for watching.